Hi everyone, welcome to another Q&A live with me, Shakina. It's lovely to be here to answer all of your OET questions, and we'll get straight into the session. The session is really simple. If you've got a question that you would like to ask us, OET, uh, put your question in the comment section on Facebook or on YouTube, wherever you're joining from, and that question will come through to me here, and I'll try my best to answer as many questions as I can in the next 60 minutes. So I can see the chat is just warming up, and we've got a question already. So I'll dive straight in. So first question is from MTJ, who joins us on YouTube, and MTJ is saying, in speaking, if you've just finished the examination and the diagnosis is eczema, how do you start the conversation? And then the second part of the question is phrases or sentences to use with an angry or reluctant or anxious patient. So those are two questions. To start with the first, when you have, so there are two ways that two broad scenarios that you could have in your role play. One is that you begin the interaction from the start, or the second way is that an examination has just finished and you're expected to continue the role play on from there. So those are two ways that your role play could start. The background information has a lot more detail than I've just said, but it will tell you which of these two situations it is. So it's clear from the background information whether you've met the patient before, whether it's you're meeting the patient for the first time, or if the examination has just finished and you need to start the role play from that point onwards. Now, the way to think about this is really simple. Imagine yourself in real life, and how you would start this interaction in real life. If you've just examined a patient, you would say something like, thank you for letting me examine you, and then proceed with whatever that is that you're supposed to do. So proceed with the tasks in the role card. So that's how you would begin. And like I said, the background information will make all of this clear. I'm going to put into chat a really great blog that uh, sort of gives you more tips and a little bit more detail on how to start the role play. So that's just coming through in the chat. So do have a look at that role play, at that blog, and that should be really helpful. Now, with regard to your second question, phrases or sentences to use with an angry, reluctant, or anxious patient, there isn't really a set. There aren't really set phrases or sentences. You need to demonstrate your clinical communication criteria to help you handle um, different sorts of patients. Now, depending on what the situation is, you would use, for example, you could explore the patient's ideas and concerns and find out what it is exactly that they're reluctant about. Why are they reluctant? What's bothering them? And from there, formulate a response that would help sort of appeal to their judgment. Now, remember that in official OET role plays, you are not given extreme scenarios where a patient will not, will be completely reluctant or very angry, that you won't be able to, like I said, demonstrate the criteria and get them out of that. Get them out of that situation. Role plays are typical everyday scenarios. Yes, you'll have reluctant patients, for example, but they won't be extreme. The interlocutor also follows a role card just like you, and they follow the prompts on the role card. And so they're not going to be overacting or they're going to be following very much. Those role cards are in sync, and they're going to be using those prompts when they're speaking to you. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to share in chat a link to our speaking guide. Our speaking guide, there are two parts. One is the linguistic criteria, a guide to the linguistic criteria, and the second part, part two, is a guide to the clinical communication criteria. And the second is what I would recommend for those clinical communication skills that you can demonstrate to help with these sorts of scenarios. So I'm just putting that in the chat as well. The speaking guides can be found on our speaking page. So if you go to our website, oet.com, we have our ready page, and in under the ready page, we have our speaking guides. So just putting that through into chat. All right. I've got a question here from Shahadat on Facebook saying, how do you improve listening part C? So I'm just going to take off your question there for a second and pull up some tips that going to specifically address listening part C. Now with listening part C, you've got 90 seconds to read read the questions for each extract. There are 2 extracts and you've got 90 seconds each. So use this reading time effectively. It's a good idea to to read the questions first and make sure you understand them, know them. In an interview, why this is important is because in an interview, the speaker, um, there are two speakers. One is going to be the interviewer, and the other is the healthcare professional or the expert that's answering the questions. Uh, the interviewer is going to signal the change in topic with the next question, and that is the logical sort of cue for you to move on to the next question. So getting familiar with the topics of the questions in the reading time is going to really help. In a presentation, the speaker will naturally signal changes in topic, which will which will help you cue to understand when the next question's coming up. So it's important to know the questions really well. Then if you've got time, look at the answer options, and when you're doing that, try and notice what the differences are in the answer options. The second tip is to keep your focus. So try your best to follow the recording. You might feel distracted, but just make sure that you keep your focus on what's happening in the recording. This is something that you might actually only really be able to develop with practice. And of course, practice of OET practice tests is great, but really increasing your concentration and your stamina to be able to listen for 40 minutes at a go to something that's quite heavy or complex is a really good idea. So building up that listening habit, working up in increments to build up your stamina is a really good idea. That's going to help you keep your focus. And then remember, if you miss a question, don't worry. Move on to the next question with the audio. Don't think about what you've just missed. Make sure that you're moving on so that you are not going to miss out on getting the next question. All right. Coming back to our questions, I'm just going to take that off. And all right. All right. So Rinsa on YouTube, who's joined us on YouTube, is asking, when a patient wants a confirmed diagnosis, I usually answer this question um, saying, I'm not authorized to confirm it. Is there another usage instead of this? So Rinsa, if I think what you're describing is perhaps something that you wouldn't really encounter really in an official OET role play, in the sense that whatever the patient is whatever the patient is asking you, you will have all of the support points on your role card to be able to answer that. So if the patient is asking you to confirm the diagnosis, you will have something on your role card that will help you, be able to answer that. One word that I would like to sort of One thing that I would like to caution you about is, looking at where you are getting some of these practice tasks from. um, like I said before, everything that you need to complete the role play will be on your role card. And if you find something unusual that you're just not able to answer on your uh, uh, if you're practicing, um, it could be because you're using an unofficial role play task. And we usually caution candidates against using unofficial tasks, is because they often mislead you about the nature of the test, and sort of what you can expect in the test. So when you go into test day, you've prepared and practiced with this, and you've got one idea of how it would be, and then when you go to the test, and you might encounter something completely different, which wouldn't have been a surprise had you practiced with official tasks. So just a word of caution there is to check the source of the role plays that you are practicing with, because all official role cards will have everything you need to be able to continue the conversation with the the patient or the carer. Okay, I've got a question here from Syed saying, I need extra material for OET reading part B and C other than the Jashan files. I think that is perhaps something that I'm not recognizing. I think that's perhaps, like I was saying, one of an example perhaps of material that's not official. You will find all of our official material on our website, oet.com. And there are two kinds of material that you'll find free material, and I'm going to talk a little bit about one particular resource that you can use for extra reading part B and C practice. And then you'll of course find paid material, which is on our OET store. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the study guide, which is our one stop shop for you if you're looking for preparation material. The study guide covers all four subtests, and there is a dedicated part for each part of the listening and the reading subtests. You've got in there, of course, all our official top official videos, blogs that we recommend. And then you have in the study guide an extra section which gives you links to resources, extra reading resources, extra listening resources that you can use to practice your listening and reading parts B, part A, part B, and part C. The resources are links to blogs, to podcasts, to articles that you can use to prepare. It's important to do this kind of listening and reading because while they're not practice test questions, they are the kinds of things that you're going to be listening and reading in parts A, parts B, and part C. So it's important to practice reading more of them, and like I said earlier, just to build up your stamina in reading these kinds of texts. So I'm going to post the link to the study guide. And it is a resource that is free. All you need to do is just download it. You can save it to your um, laptop, your phone, your PC, whatever you're using, and you've got sections that you can tick off there. um, so you've got the study guide. You can take a printout of it, but ideally, because it has links, it's great to be used online. The second sort of resource I mentioned is our OET store. So we have our reading course, which has extra practice material if you're looking for official OET practice tasks. So extra material there, as well as skills and strategies that are going to help you succeed. The reading course is again something that is completely online, and you can access it from anywhere. And whether that's your phone or your laptop, at any time you're traveling on the bus from work, um, or you've got a few free minutes in your lunch break, you can access the course anytime, anywhere, like I said. So that's another great resource, our OET reading course, that you can make use of. I'm going to put the link to um, the reading course in the chat right now. All right, so let's continue. I'm just going to look for some questions. Right, I've got a question here from Rinsa saying, are you getting my point? Could you please provide more synonyms for this usage? So when you say, are you getting my point? I think what you're trying to do is to just check if the patient has understood what you've explained, or what you've explained to them. So there are different ways you could do this, and like I said, there are different skills that you sort of need to demonstrate while you're uh, doing your role play. And one of the criteria, one of the skills that you need um, to demonstrate is under the speaking assessment criteria, which is information giving, and which is basically checking whether the patient has understood the information that you've provided. And that is sort of what your question is. Um, Sometimes a phrase like that um, can come across sort of a little bit to put the patient on the spot. The patient can feel a little bit a little bit nervous, might feel like they have to say, yes, I understand what you're saying. So instead of that, perhaps asking them more open-ended questions would be a great way to elicit whether they've really understood what you're saying. So for example, how do you feel about what I've shared so far? Or what do you think about the information I've just given you? And do you have any questions about what I've just shared? So those sorts of more open-ended questions will help the patient open up a bit more and share really what it is that they've understood. Now, I shared earlier in chat the speaking guides. The part two guide, which is the speaking guide to the clinical communication criteria, is something that will really help you. And the guide is broken up into different chapters. Each chapter is dedicated to one of the assessment criteria. And I just mentioned information giving. So one part of the guide, one chapter is all about information giving, and will give you more examples and more ways that you can check that the patient has understood the information. All right, so I'm just so I've got a question here from Bradley on Facebook saying, can you give an example of how to give a therapeutic response to a patient who is aggressive in the speaking role play card? So Bradley, like I said earlier, you will have to handle different sorts of patients in your role plays. Now, all of them are not going to be extremely you're not going to get a situation where a patient is extremely aggressive, where to the point where you're going to be left on your own. You are following the role card, you've got support points there to help you, and then you've got the interlocutor who is following the prompts on their role card. So just keep that in mind. You're not going to have to handle an extremely aggressive patient um, in your role play. In real life, of course, there are different sorts of patients, and you might have to handle some aggressive ones. The skills that you will need are all there in the speaking assessment criteria, in the clinical communication criteria. And it really would depend on the scenario, what sort of skill you pick up on to be able to handle the patient. You might, if a patient is, irritated about something, you might want to demonstrate active listening to show that you're listening to what their concerns are. And you might, follow that up with asking them and exploring more of their concerns and ideas, so that they feel like they have been listened to. So you're using two skills there. You're using active listening, and you're exploring the patient's concerns and ideas. The active listening part of it is under uh, it's your gathering information. So that's under the information gathering criterion, and exploring and eliciting the patient's ideas and concerns by asking them more probing questions, or an open-ended question is understanding and incorporating their perspective, that criterion. So it really depends but on the situation, but you're essentially picking up on what's happening, what the background is, and then using those demonstrating those clinical communication criteria to be able to handle that patient. So again, I'd recommend the speaking guide part 2, which is our clinical communication criteria guide. That's going to help you really give you some more examples, specific examples of those situations. So I've got a question here from Keo saying, could you suggest how to overcome spelling mistakes in listening part A? So this is spelling is an important part of listening part A. You are expected to spell accurately. There is some flexibility uh, in in how spelling is assessed compared to reading part A. Remember, in reading part A, you are expected to spell 100% correctly. Now, there is some flexibility in listening part A, but you are still expected to spell accurately, especially words that are commonly known to healthcare professionals and to lay people. So, words like cholesterol, diabetes, those sorts of words are commonly known, and you are expected to spell those correctly. In terms of mistakes, it's a good idea to develop a personal checklist of the kinds of mistakes that you're making in spelling. So have a look at all of the listening part A's that you've practiced so far. Have a look at what spellings you are getting wrong. There could be a certain pattern of spelling that you are getting wrong. So, for example, um, shin, tion, that could be a pattern. Maybe a double r, or double consonant, like scarring, for example. You're getting that, words like that wrong. It really depends on, so have a look at your um, spelling test so far, your listening test so far, and see where you've got which patterns you're making mistakes, and create a checklist and practice those spellings. Sometimes it is a matter of repetition. So once you've identified the pattern, then it is a matter of just of repeating that spelling, maybe writing it down a few times, so that you kind of get used to, your muscle memory of how that word is spelt, and that sort of really registers. So though that would be my tip. I'm also going to put into chat our listening week playlist. Now, our listening week playlist has 5 videos, one for each part of the test, and there are 2 videos. The first and the last video really talk about how to improve your listening, and one of those aspects is spelling for the test. And so I'd recommend going through those that video, um, to really to get some more tips on how you can improve. So I've just put that into chat now. All right, so I've got some more newer questions coming in, and I'm going to look at them. If you've joined just now, welcome. And if you've got a question that you would like to ask us, please feel free to put that in chat. The question can be about anything: listening, reading, writing, speaking. It can be about preparation in general. Whatever your question is, put it in the chat, and I'll try my best to answer. Um, all right. So I've got a question here from Juntima on Facebook, saying they wrote the test last month, the computer based test. In listening, there are some changes about the time after finishing each task. Do you know about these changes? So, yes. Uh, Remember, so in the listening test, if you're taking OET on paper, you have checking time at the end um, of the Part C extract to review your answers. Now, if you're taking OET on computer or at home, you have checking time at the end of each extract. So, whether you are doing listening on paper or on computer, you have checking time. So, this has not changed. Um, Now, the test on computer and OET at home have a fixed duration for each part of the time, for each part of the test. And so the amount of time provided for checking is determined actually by the length of the audio. So collectively, they are the same time, same length combined, uh, but it might seem different than slightly different than the paper-based test. But you do have checking time in both modes of the test. All right, I've got a question here from Rocklin on YouTube. Are there any new updates in each of the modules? No, there are no new updates. There have been no changes to the test. So the format of the test and the skills being tested are the same. There has been no change, but it was a good idea to check with us. Okay, just looking for some newer questions. Right, a question here from Cindy on YouTube saying, I'm preparing for my OET test, but I'm having challenges with reading, especially part A. Time always catches up with me, and I'll be grateful if you can help. Um, so I'll talk a little bit about part A. But I'm just going to take your question off for a second and put up my part A tips. Now, there is timed pressure in part A, but there's plenty in the test itself to help you. One of the things that help you are the questions themselves. So, at the first set of questions are matching questions, which give you a broad idea of what's in the four texts. If you start with those, the answers are pretty easy to find, quick to find, and they will help you get familiar with the test with the texts. Finishing them first is a good idea, and then moving on to the other questions, because um, once you get to the short answer questions, or the gap fill questions, you already know what's in the four texts. So would highly encourage you to go through the questions in order. The next thing that you can use are text features. Now, what do I mean by that? In reading part A, you'll find texts that you use every day. So, for example, you use every day on the ward. So, treatment pathways, dosage charts, and all of these kinds of pieces of all of these texts are designed to help you find information quickly. So they've got headings, subheadings, bullet points, there are charts, tables. So all of these are features that can help you read quickly. You don't need to read each word, each line from left to right. Just your eyes can go all over the place looking for information and using these text features to help you find your way to the answer. So this and the third tip is to make sure your spelling is 100% accurate. Sometimes what can happen is you can waste marks because you haven't spent a few extra seconds checking that the spelling is right. So spending a few extra seconds is vital, because it ensures that you don't waste any marks. um, and then the final tip, of course, is not to panic about the time. Now, that is easier said than done. One thing that I'm going to suggest is, while you're practicing, to actually remove the time. Of Don't have a timer in front of you. Just go through the questions and become familiar with the skills, and just answering those questions. Once you've done that, see how long that takes, and then work your way down, cutting out a couple of minutes each time to eventually reach the um, the 15 minutes. So if you, for example, took 25 minutes, bring it down slowly to 22, 20, and down to 15. So that will help you really become familiar with the skills, rather than panicking about time. All right. Right. So I've got it's taking that off there. Coming back to the questions. Right. So I've got a question here from Krishnan. Krishnan saying, given us a sentence saying she's recovering after total hip replacement. When is this suitable in the writing introduction? So Krishnan, this sort of sentence, it would really depend on what is there in your case notes. So if the patient in the case notes is really recovering from a total hip replacement, you would definitely use that in the introduction. But in addition to that, there will be in your case notes and in the writing task a purpose for writing, and it's important to be able to identify the purpose. It tells you why the letter is being written, and why the reader needs to read that letter. What do they need to do to continue care for the patient? So finding the purpose will help you frame your introduction in a personalized way. The sentence you've given is of course a general sentence. It's something that you've thought of before looking at the writing task. So while that is useful, it's also equally important to look at what the purpose is and frame a personalized introduction, a personalized sentence to match what the task is, and what the task says that the purpose for writing is. I'm going to put into chat our writing guide, which covers each of the criteria. I would recommend looking at the purpose chapter of the writing guide, which will give you really handy tips on how you can write a personalized introduction. We're not a template is they can be useful, but templates are not really going to demonstrate to the assessors that you've understood the purpose and that you have clearly communicated the purpose to your reader. So it's important not to rely on templates, but to really rely on the task, and identifying the purpose for the task. So I'm just putting into chat the writing guide. Um, and like I said, do check out the purpose chapter of the writing guide. Okay, I've got a question from Hari saying, does it matter whether a word begins with a capital or a lowercase letter? So when you are when you're talking about the reading and the listening subtests, capitalization does not matter. For reading, we would recommend copy the word exactly as it appears in the text. Just copy it exactly, and you will be fine. With listening, if you it, like I said, it does capitalization does not matter. If you choose to write in all caps in reading or listening, write all of your answers in all caps, that's absolutely fine, but make sure that you use it consistently. So all of your answers need to be written in all caps so that there is no confusion about your letters and your answers in the minds of the assessor. Um, Similarly, with writing, if you choose to use all caps, that's absolutely fine. You can do that, but like I said, use it consistently. So your letter from start to finish must be written in all caps. In writing, yes, if you're not using all caps, then it does, capitalization can play a role. Obviously it's not natural to start a sentence with a lowercase letter. You would need to start with a capital letter, so that can be distracting for your reader, because they'd be used to reading a sentence that starts with a capital, and that could impact on your language, your score and your language criterion, um, if it's extremely distracting to the reader. So it really it depends on which part of the test you're talking about. um, but what I'm going to do is put into chat um, a blog that will talk a little bit more about um, what I've just said. um, so that's just coming through in chat right now. Right. Just looking for some newer questions. Okay, I've got a question here from Daniel on YouTube saying the reading part is also very hard. How can I get better? So, there's a couple of ways that I can recommend that you improve your reading. And I'm going to post into chat a link to our Reading Week playlist, which um, gives you more tips and explains in greater detail what I'm going to talk about briefly right now. So, the first way is to practice reading the kinds of things that you will read in the OET test. So, if you think of part A, like I said earlier, you've got your medication tables, dosage charts, you've got treatment pathways. Um, those sorts of things are the kind of reading that you'll do in reading part A. So practicing more of those, reading more of those, is going to help you improve in part A. With part B, you're reading workplace communication, so memos, emails, um, guidelines, policy documents. Those are the kinds of things that you're reading in part B. So, getting your hands on those and reading more of those is going to help you become more familiar with that. And then finally, for part C, you've got articles of general medical interest that you read generally when you want to improve your knowledge of developments in the field. You want to keep up to date with what's happening in the medical world. So those are the kinds of things that you would read in part C. So those are the three kinds of things, and each one requires different reading skills. So getting familiar with them and reading more of them is a good step. Second tip is to do more reading every single day. Now, it sounds quite boring when you hear of it. It's not sort of a very, it doesn't sound like a very groundbreaking tip, but it is actually the one that's going to make the most difference in your score. When you read, make sure you read outside of OET practice tests. Read all of the things that I just talked about um, outside of OET practice tests. It's a good idea to build a reading habit as much as you can get through in every day, every week, if possible. And like I said, I'm going to put into chat our reading week playlist, which has great tips and tools for how you can, build this habit and incorporate it into your daily life. So have a look at um, the reading week playlist. All right. So I've got a question here from Rocklin. In writing, other than referral, discharge, transfer, what um, are the case notes that we can get in the test, or uh, essentially what kind of letter? Um, I think what you're asking is what kind of letter do you need to write in the test if you're doing the nursing test. So yes, those are the three main types of letters: referral, discharge, and transfer for nursing. Now, it's important to remember that there are different types of letters. Um, we're calling them a referral, a discharge, or transfer, but the skills that you need to write the letter and the way that you write the letter, the approach that you have is the same. All right. So when you write any letter to another healthcare professional, you need to make sure that you keep the reader in mind. Healthcare professionals are busy people. They've got a lot on um, every single moment. And when they read a letter from another professional, they want to understand very quickly what it is that they need to do, and why this patient is being referred or transferred or discharged, what's their role in the care of this patient. So that needs to come through really quickly. So it doesn't matter what kind of letter it is, you need to make sure that you are communicating this in your letter as clearly and effectively as possible. So I'm going to recommend to you our writing guide. That's going to give you lots of examples of how you can do exactly this, regardless of the letter. Um, it walks you through each of the criteria, what the assessors are looking for, and examples of how you can demonstrate the skills that you need for a successful letter. Um, so I've shared the link to the writing guide, and I'm also sharing a blog post on the three types of letters in OET. And so it doesn't really matter on test day what type of letter. What you need to pay attention to are, like I said, the core skills of communicating to the reader why the letter is being written and what they need to do to communicate to continue care for the patient. All right. So I've got a question here from Ali. Um, Ali saying, in my first attempt, I got 340, and then the next time it keeps decreasing to 300. So my question is, could you please elaborate more about listening part A? I really appreciate. So Ali, it seems like you've identified that listening part A might be a possible weakness for you. So that's excellent. I'm going to share some tips for listening part A, and also just talk a little bit more about how you can improve your scores. So here we are with listening part A. I've just taken your question off, um, and you can see these tips there. With listening part A, you need to make sure that you use your reading time really well. Um, and there are a few things in the listening part A notes that you see with your question paper, that's going to help you um, really, excel. So one of the things is your headings. Your headings in listening part A kind of give you a sense of the flow of the conversation. What's the conversation um, going to, what topics are going to be discussed, and what flow, what order are they going to be talked about in. During your reading time, read the context sentence and these headings to really activate your brain to start thinking about what you could possibly hear. The idea here is not to guess what you might hear, but just to get your brain prepared to listen. Um, while you're paying attention to the headings, you'll also see there are some untested notes. So there's some notes there which don't have any blanks around them. So keeping attention to those will also help you understand what the speakers could be talking about. So that's really important to do. And this is what we call anticipating um, w- during reading time. You can also anticipate the type of answer from the other words around the gap. So I've talked about headings, I've talked about untested notes that you can read and pay attention to, but there are also words directly around the gap. So before and after, that will help you understand what kind of word it is. So is it a possible symptom, or is it a trigger? Is it maybe a remedy that they tried? So thinking about that will also help prepare your brain to listen, so that when the answer does come, you're already sort of, your brain is tuned to that. Make sure that you write only one answer. So the answer that you need to write will be in the audio, and make sure that you write that, you're clear about your answer and you write only one answer. um, for listening party, an additional tip that I would like to give you is to make sure you spell correctly, you aim to spell accurately. Like I said, there is flexibility in listening part A, but often marks are wasted because when words are commonly known to both medical professionals and patients, you are expected to spell those correctly, and often candidates don't. So it's important to make sure you pay attention to spelling as well. I'm going to post in the chat a video on how to succeed in listening part A. This is a video that has plenty more examples and more tips for you. So that would be a great way that you can, understand maybe something that you could be doing wrong. And then a final tip would be also to make sure that you are listening to mm, patient and healthcare professional interactions. So make sure that you listen to more real life consultations. You can find plenty of examples of this on YouTube, um, or in medical dramas. So getting used to different accents and real conversations is another way that you can improve your listening party. Right, so I'll just take this off there and look for uh, some newer questions. All right. Um, Foz is asking, in reading part A, uh, do we have to use capital letters, or if we write with the capital letter, is it okay? Um, so yes, you capitalization doesn't matter in reading part A, but do need to spell correctly. And it's important also to remember that it's just easiest to copy the word exactly as it appears in the text to your answer sheet, so there is no confusion, or you won't feel unsure about your answers. Just copy it exactly as it appears. And then in reading part A, if you written follow up and you write have a space after the hyphen, does that matter? um, so like I said, just copy the word exactly as it is. A space shouldn't matter, but it is important to make sure that you don't really change the word in any way. You just copy it exactly as it is. All right, I've got a question here from Joyal on YouTube saying, could you please tell us the advantages of OET over PTE? Um, so, OET is, I can talk a bit about OET and what the advantages are. OET is the only healthcare specific test for healthcare professionals. And the biggest advantage is that while you're preparing for the test, you're actually not preparing for a language test, you're actually preparing for real life. So all of the skills and all of the tasks and questions that you do in each part of the test are things that you will do in real life when you go to your destination country, your dream country. They're all things that you will be doing as you talk to patients. In speaking, it's a role play between a healthcare professional and a patient or a relative or carer. It's specific to your profession. So the scenarios will be scenarios that you encounter typically in your everyday practice. Um, and you will, as you're preparing for the speaking test, learn the clinical communication, the skills that you need to communicate effectively with patients in different settings. So with speaking, that's a huge advantage. So when you go to the ward on day one, you're not going to know how to talk to your patients, how to ask them about what they're experiencing, how to give them information, how to empathize and reassure them. All of those are really important skills. With writing, you're going to be writing a letter to another healthcare professional. And so again, that's something that you're going to be expected to do on from day one. Communicate information about patients to other healthcare professionals. So with writing, that's a huge advantage. With reading, you're going to be reading dosage charts, memos, emails every day. So again, those are skills that you will build for uh, reading skills that you're going to build. And similarly with listening, you're going to be listening to handovers, listening to interactions between patient and healthcare professionals, like a consultation. Again, those are all real life things that you're going to encounter. So preparing for OET is not just preparing for a test, it's really building up the language skills that you're going to need in your uh, everyday life, in real life. And so that is perhaps that's the biggest advantage of um, of OET. And um, I'm going to put into um, um, sort of a news article, just a little bit, if you are sort of interested in studies that have been done on this particular aspect. And if you're interested in reading a bit more, put that in the chat as well. All right, and with that, we have come to the end of the hour. So it's been lovely answering all of your questions. Don't worry if you haven't had your question answered. I'm going to be back again on the 13th of August at 6 p.m. India time, which is 4:30 if you're in the UAE, 8:30 in the Philippines, um, 8:30 in the morning if you're in New York, if you're joining us from that side of the globe, and 1:30 in the UK. So I'll be back again. And if you've got a burning question you'd like us to answer, contact us on our Facebook page, on our messenger service, and we will aim to get back to you within 24 hours. Until next time, thank you. Bye for now.